Let me tell you the problem with the believer that most of you really don't like. The problem with the believer now is you would have quit if you could. You would have walked out on God if you could. But what happened is you know too much about him to quit on him now. Talk to me, somebody. This is not the first time you've been going through things and you know too much about him. You know he's a God that'll make a way out of no way. You know he's a God that'll turn it around. You know you have a Jeremiah experience. That Jeremiah said, I quit. I'm done with this God stuff. Every time I preach, folks throwing rocks. But you let my contemporaries and my peers preaching folks throw money. Jeremiah said, therefore I quit. I'm done. Take back the keys to the Cadillac. Taking off the pinky ring and the gator shoes. I'm done with it. I'm done preaching. And Jeremiah went somewhere and sat down and quit. And the more he sat there, something began to stir up in his stomach. That I imagine at first he might have thought it was cramps. A little bit later he might have thought because he was hungry. But it just kept on burning. And every time he opened his mouth, more word would just flow out of his mouth. Then he had to recognize, but it's like fire. Shut up in my bones. Would you testify to somebody and tell them I would have quit on God a long time ago if I did not know how good he's been in spite of what I've been through? Find somebody else and tell him I would have walked out on him a long time ago unless I knew how awesome he is, how he keeps making ways. So pain is inevitable, but suffering is a choice. You've got to choose, oh God, to go through what you're going through. Oh, any Tom, Dick, or Harry can give up. But it takes a real believer to say, you know what? I'm going to take this burden and put it square on my back. And whatever happens, happens. But I refuse to give up. See, this is where God gives you the glory and the strength. And regardless of what you're carrying, you still have your measure of joy. Like the songwriter said, after all I've been through, I still got joy. Let me share with you, my God, I feel like preaching here, the fundamental difference between you and the believer. The non-believer, see, the non-believer with their burden, they're bent over like this with all they're carrying, and they're looking down and they're feeling sorry for themselves. But there's something about you and the Holy Ghost on the inside of you that the burden that you're carrying, it should have you bent over, but some kind of way God has you. I thought I would have got a witness right. You've learned how to stand up under pressure with weights on your back and still manage to give God some glory. Please turn to your neighbor and tell him, neighbor, you have no idea of the burden I got on my back. But the God I serve, y'all got to preach to your neighbor because they need some preaching right now. Tell them the God that I serve, he's blessed me to be able to stand under pressure. I got bills on my back. I got family trouble. I've got trouble on my job. But the God that I serve, he's able to do exceedingly, abundantly, above all that we could ask or think. Somebody say yeah. Yeah, 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 yeah. I feel like preaching right here. Turn to your neighbor and tell him, neighbor, when I come through this, tell him when I get through this. Somebody needs to start shouting right after when. Look at him again and say, when. When simply means I know I'm coming out. It may not be today. It might not be tomorrow. But I know I'm coming out of this. Shake your neighbor and tell him, I know I'm coming out of this. Say it. Listen here. 4, I reckon that the sufferings of this world, this present time, cannot be compared with the glory that shall be revealed in us. Sit down for a second. Let me teach you this part, and then I'm going to my seat. The glory which shall be revealed. In order for you to get through what you're going through, you've got to have a clear vision of what you know God is going to do in your life. Y'all didn't hear what I said. You've got to know this point in time in your life. If you still guessing, you're going to mess around and mess up. You got to know that your Redeemer liveth and that you're coming through this circumstance. You've got to set your goal and say, I know. Set your goal. Number 2, you've got to understand that it will be worth it. Oh. Everything you're going through is going to be worth it. Oh. Paul says this in 2 Corinthians 4:17, for our light affliction, which is but for a moment, worketh us a far more exceeding and eternal weight of glory. What I'm going through doesn't compare for what God has for me on the other side. Then Paul picks up something again in Ephesians 6:12 and says, for we wrestle not against flesh and blood. Talk to your neighbor and tell him, my beef ain't with you. My beef ain't with you. My beef ain't with the folks on my job. It's the spirit in them that I got a beef with. You got to learn how to love people and hate the devil on the inside of them, and stop getting frustrated that they find you every day to mess with. It's just a contrary spirit. You got to love them but deal with the devil on the inside.